The candidates we have for election today, as listed on the ballot, are Elizabeth Betancourt, Megan Dahle, Patrick Henry Jones, Lane Rickard, and Joe Turner. They're sitting up here in a different order because they had to draw straws to see who would speak first, second, and third. Let me describe our format for the evening. We never change our format, so this might be boring to you because we always do it the same way. The order of speaking has been determined by lot. Each candidate will make an initial presentation of 3 minutes about their background, areas of general concern, and their reasons for running for office. Subsequently, questions will be directed at the candidates in rotating order so that the same candidate is not always the first responder. The candidates will have 1 minute to respond to questions. That will keep them brief and to the point. Our timekeeper will keep the candidates apprised of the time. Each candidate will then make a closing statement of 3 minutes. The statements will be timed, and the timekeeper will hold up a white card indicating 1 minute remaining, a yellow card, well, we have a green card for 1 minute tonight, but a yellow card for 30 seconds and a red card for stop. Any questions about that? Okay. Thank you to our timekeepers, Patty Jelovich, Donna Nelson. As you came in, you were handed 3x5 cards on which to write your questions. If you did not get a card or you need a card, please hold up your hand and a league member will bring you a card. When you finish writing your question, hold your hand up again and somebody will come and collect it. Please, 1 question per card. Sometimes people give me these cards with like 11 questions in teeny weeny writing, and I cannot make my way through those. I cannot see in the half dark up here. We will address questions of general concern addressed to all candidates. So don't write a question that is particular to one candidate, please. We will, I want to apologize in advance. You know, one of the things that upsets people is we are really not able to ask every single question that we get. I anticipate that today we'll ask somewhere between 12 and 15 questions, depending on how quickly we move through them. And usually we get 100 or so. So obviously we can't answer every question. Speaking of questions, see my pile? I already have a pile. So are we ready to get started? We're going to go in order. I'll call your name and then you'll speak. Please do not stand, because if you stand, you will your head will be cut off of your body on the... Okay, that's perfectly clear. All right, Joe, you get to introduce everybody to this experience. You get to go first. This is Joe Turner.
Thank you very, very much for putting on this event and inviting us all. My name is Joe Turner. I am a Lassen County resident. I lived throughout the North State my entire life when I wasn't overseas with the military. I enlisted when I was 17 years old, and I spent 17 years in the military, which ultimately caused me to retire at an earlier age a couple years ago. It's not what I wanted to do. I'd rather still be in uniform, still serving, but I took this as an opportunity as a different way to serve. For people who don't know, not everybody's going to know much about me, but I am the only staunch constitutionalist in this race. If that's something that's important to you, it's something that's very, very near and dear to my heart. And I swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that means I have to believe it and I have to know it, and it's something that I have to fight for and strive for wherever I go. I'm married, I have a beautiful young daughter, and my young daughter is one of the reasons why I decided to join in this race. My wife, we had a conversation not that long ago, which many people either here have had it, or they know people who've had it and or have done it. People are moving out of the North State in droves. People are not happy with how California is being managed. It's expensive, the taxes keep going up. A lot of people are unhappy about what they feel are infringements on their rights. And quite frankly, my wife and I, we agree. And so when this was coming available, I told her, let me try. Let me see what we can do. And I actually have a plan to try to change things in California for the better. And not everybody necessarily agrees with that because a lot of people like the way that the system's currently working. I currently believe that California is an oligarchy. That's a government controlled by a few small group of people. Only 120 legislators to represent 40 million people. That's not representation. It's not enough. We need more representation. We have to fix California as a republic as guaranteed in the Constitution, so that way we can bring balance to all of the issues that we have without having a one-party rule. And when we have a one-party rule, the other party gets very upset, and a lot of things just don't work out well for everybody. There needs to be some give and take with the system. Other things about my experience, I was the Lassen County Republican Central Committee chair for a year. I'm currently on the California GOP Platform Committee. I have been on the Lassen County Civil Grand Jury. I've been very involved in my local county. I have helped defeat a tax measure, a dishonest sales tax measure in Lassen County last year, and it's something that I believe we need to be responsible on all fronts. We need to manage our forests. We need to manage our lands much better. We need to keep our people safe. We need to better manage our economies so that way it can actually grow and not contract it. And our people and our children have a reason to stay here and continue having more children here.
Thank you. Lane?
Hello everyone. I apologize in advance for any random coughing or sneezing. I'm just now getting over a flu. I want to talk a little bit about myself and why I decided to run for public office. I'm born and raised in Redding, California, and I got involved in politics at 18 years old when I helped run a campaign for City Council member Brent Weaver. I started off as free labor, and then through that I continued to get more roles and more responsibilities and led as a true force on his team. It was through that campaign, that successful race, that I got recognized by the office of State Senator Ted Gaines and began interning in the Redding District office. Took about a couple weeks, and then I ended up as a staffer for Senator Gaines. I was a field rep and eventually ended up running the Redding District office for Senator Gaines, and through that 5 years I really got to travel the district from Wairika all the way to Sacramento and meet with local city officials and understand the issues of the constituents. And through that 5 years I continuously heard the same problems over and over again, and they still have yet to go unaddressed. And that's what made me want to run in the first place. I saw problems in my home and I wanted to fix them. So with that being said, I created a platform of public safety, disaster relief, and development. I'd like to quickly talk about those issues and what I hope to accomplish with those issues as your assemblyman. For public safety, right here in Redding, we experience crime rates that are double, even triple that of national averages. Statistically speaking, you're actually more likely to experience crime right here in Redding than in Sacramento, San Francisco, or even Los Angeles. I find that to be completely unacceptable. One thing I'd like to do with public safety is have the state of California start recognizing areas of crime within our state that have higher crime rates than national averages and increase funding to those areas. One way we could do it through policy is AB 109 funding. We could increase the mandatory funding for local communities. Homelessness here in Redding is a dire concern to all, and that's an issue I'm very passionate about. I'd like to create state mental health programs in the state of California that can help get individuals the proper health care they need so they can get rehabilitated and brought back into society as proud and productive members of it. Through Car Fire, we all here witnessed the devastation. The fire enclosed on my home, as I'm sure it enclosed on all of your homes. We need better fire management program systems. One thing I'd like to do as your assemblyman, working firsthand during that car fire, I saw how difficult it was to get evacuation notices out for individuals. I'd like to work with state OES to create a program that would allow private citizens to go out and do evacuation notices so that police officers and firefighters can handle their jobs. Finally, responsible development. I'd like to improve our aging roadways, update our bridges, improve the infrastructure of rural California. I want to make Northern California a great place for individuals to come to and compete in the ever-changing economy that is California. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I call that good timing. Elizabeth?
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Betancourt. Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters and to the Arts Council for hosting this tonight. It's an excellent platform, and thank you to all of you for being here and being a part of building a civil society in this area. I own a small farm here in Shasta County out in Happy Valley. My husband and I have been here for a number of years. He spent a significant portion of his childhood here, and we love it here. It's beautiful. I've been working on rural issues for most of my career and in rural spaces for almost 20 years, working on water and natural resources, advocating for our spaces and our people. And some of the things I've seen when doing that, both with the administration in Sacramento as well as with the legislature, is that more and more, while Sacramento is recognizing the value of our resources, they are not recognizing how we work with them, us as communities and individuals on the ground. And I'm running to ensure that while the state invests in our resources, they should also be investing in our people. And that should look like certainly resources to help us access education more readily, options, increased quality, also with healthcare, and looking at options that have been tested elsewhere that we know are proven that we don't have access to here yet. It also needs to look like a different way of considering regulation of our small businesses, our small farms, and our resource spaces, encouraging and enhancing innovation opportunities in our spaces. The nearly 20 years that I've spent on water resources and natural resources management has led me to see that there's a number of opportunities that we could pursue in our region that would increase and enhance jobs availability, community investment, even address some of our housing crisis, but that are unavailable either due to economic pressures or to considerations of society that largely is built on legislation focusing on urban areas. And so as a member, I should acknowledge I am the only Democrat on the ticket. And yes, Democrats are in the supermajority in Sacramento. And due to the relationships I've built in advocating and working with the legislature over many years, as well as being a member of the majority party, I have an exceptional opportunity, we have an exceptional opportunity to really take advantage of that power and work in collaboration with the legislature rather than in opposition. So I would welcome your input. I'm running not as somebody who has all the answers, although certainly I love brainstorming new ideas, but as somebody who would work in partnership with you and be out there with you, meeting with you regularly and talking about the issues that we all care about. We all live here and we want this to be a beautiful space for ourselves and our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan Dahle?
Thank you so much for having us here this evening. I'm Megan Dahle, and I'm a farmer and small business owner. Brian and I own Big Valley Seed Company. We're dryland wheat farmers, and we also have a trucking division to our business. We have full-time employees, and I run our day-to-day operations, so I understand regulations, compliance, and the cost of doing business. I know how hard it is to own and operate a business in the state of California. We are over-regulated and overtaxed. I have held an elected office. I've been a school board member, president for 2 of those years, and I also sit on several nonprofit boards. We need effective conservative representation in Sacramento. I am pro-public safety. I am honored that I've been trusted with 6 of the county sheriffs have endorsed me. I also believe we need to aggressively manage our forests. That means get the fuel out of our forests and provide the resources that our first responders and our firefighters need to protect us. I've been endorsed also by the California Professional Firefighters and the California State Firefighters Association because they understand that these partnerships are critical to our district. I'm pro-parental choice. I'm a mother of 3 children. I believe that my physician and I can have a discussion over what goes into our children's bodies, not the government. I'm pro-school choice. That is why I enjoyed my time very much on the school board. An age-appropriate curriculum. I'm pro-Second Amendment. Having the right to bear arms is a constitutional fundamental right of our republic. I'm pro-life and a believer. And I'm running for the future, our children, our neighbors, and our communities. We want to have the opportunity to someday pass down our family farm. We're not leaving California. Our ground is here. We're staying here. We're going to work hard. And I will work hard to build relationships so that we can have a stronger North State. Thank you for this evening and this opportunity, and I look forward to the further discussion.
Thank you. Patrick Jones.
Thank you. Thank you for all of you showing up tonight. I am Patrick Henry Jones, and I want to thank the League for having and hosting this event. I'd like to thank you, Susan, for being the moderator and doing this for so many years. She does a great job, so thank you. So I grew up here in Reading, and I work at Jones's Fort Gun Shop. I've worked there from a very young age. So I've been there for over 40 years in a small business here, right here in Reading and in Shasta County. And over that time, the immense regulation that we have had to deal with over that time has been incredible. And it's moving small businesses, which is the lifeblood of California. They're moving out of California at an all-time rate. And we all have friends and family and even close family members that are deciding to leave California because of the overtaxing and the overregulation. And being in a small business for over 40 years has taught me that. And we have to fight. We have to do something different than what we've been doing today. I ask people as we drive around, I put on probably, me and my wife Lori have driven probably over 4,000 miles going to Siskiyou County and Modoc County and Sierra County, Nevada County, Placer County, and it's the same everywhere we go. Everybody is feeling the lack of representation and overburdensome regulations and taxes. It's everywhere. And it's what prompted me to run for this job, is just that. Now, I also served on the Reading City Council. I first started getting involved in local politics here in the city. I was not happy with the votes that I saw, and I thought instead of complaining about it, let's do something about it. And so I ran in 2002, 2004, and I was first elected to Reading City Council in 2006. And I was mayor in 2010, and I was reelected in 2010 and served to 2014. So I have 8 years on the Reading City Council. So I am prepared for this job, and I got a great taste of what Sacramento's like. I would go down to Sacramento on a routine basis, and Sacramento is simply out of touch with District 1. From Shasta County all the way to Siskiyou and Modoc, and even down into Nevada County and Placer, it's the same response over and over. We need experienced leadership today more than ever. I think I am the most experienced in this race. I'm also the oldest in this race. Usually I'm the youngest, but this time I'm the oldest. So I appreciate the opportunity to answer questions tonight. I am Patrick Henry Jones. I'd like to earn your vote August 27th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that ends our opening statements. So Lane, you get to answer the first question first. Ready?
Ready.
First question. What would be your #1 priority if you were elected to the State Assembly? And please tell us why.
I talked about this during my platform. It would break down to those 3 issues. I think there's inherent issues in Assembly District 1 that need to be resolved before we can start looking at other problems. Public safety really starts to degrade the culture of a community, and how can we have a community when crime is completely destroying it? How can you start up a business when you have to worry about crime devastating that business? So public safety is going to be one of the hugest problems to me. Just being from Reading, experienced Reading since birth, seeing the crime and how it's affected our communities, it's something I'm really passionate about resolving. Also, the fires that have recently happened, I mean, we haven't seen fires that devastating in years. We really need to have better fire prevention methods. What happened to Paradise can happen to Shingletown, it can happen to Dunsmuir, it can even happen to Reading. We need to have better policy to be prepared for when disaster begins.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, there's so many priorities. I think it's really hard to pick one, but I'm a big fan of actually going to the root of problems rather than putting Band-Aids on them. So what I would say is looking at creating more opportunities for people in the North State, and that would include additional job opportunities, it would include educational opportunities, it would include housing opportunities. Affordable housing is a huge problem throughout the state of California. So creating those opportunities through any means possible, and opportunities that are specific to our North State needs, rather than looking at the Band-Aids of housing that have been proposed in Sacramento the last couple of years. Really creating specific solutions that we can implement on a local government basis. Rather than just saying, oh, let's create a bunch of public jobs out there, actually looking at the needs in our community and helping our young people and people looking to change careers to really invest in themselves and in our community.
Thank you. Megan?
Thank you. So public safety. But to me, that includes not just crime and homelessness, but it also includes fire safety in our communities. Because as the fires have come, and they will come again, the entire CAL FIRE map, our whole district is red. So we're in a high threat zone. So our firefighters and first responders, police officers, they were on scene at these fires. So we need to really come alongside of our public safety and make sure that they have all the resources that they need. And I'm very thankful for the endorsements I have had from the sheriffs and the firefighters, because they do know that a strong voice in Sacramento is what we need for the North State. We don't look like the rest of the state, absolutely. So we need someone that has built those relationships and go right to work as soon as I'm there. I'm excited to be able to do that.
Thank you. Patrick?
So clearly, as I've gotten around, representation is absolutely the #1 issue from county to county. The lack of representation. California does not know District 1 exists. It is a huge issue. I have about 5 main issues, and one issue that I'd like to talk about, and it's a top issue for me, is the pension tsunami that's about to hit. It will affect every city and county in California, and in the next correction cycle, which will happen in the next 4 to 7 years, you're going to see city after city and county after county default on their CalPERS payment, just like Loyalton did. I visited Loyalton, which is in this district, which is in Sarah County, and to see firsthand exactly what happens when you default. And this tsunami is real. It's affecting every city and county adversely, and it's affecting public safety, infrastructure, and so many other things. I'm one of the few candidates that's really diving deep into the pension tsunami that must be dealt with or it will fail.
Thank you. Joe?
My top priority is making sure that the North State is a place where our families want to stay and where our families want to continue to grow and have more families. And that comes under a whole slew of different ways: public safety, fire, pensions, all of these things. But the primary reason the primary way to do that is to fix the Republic in California. California is out of control. We have the second largest constitution in the world, only after India. It's incredibly complicated. The complications make it very difficult for businesses to stay here and to operate and function properly. People are sick of it. They're moving. California's lost over $50 billion in annual adjusted gross income. That's a lot of jobs, and we've gotten more people, about 9 million more people in that same time. So we have to fix the Republic, and my basic plan is I want to see elected representatives and municipalities sue California back into submission, into being a state and a republic that honors the Constitution and respects our rights.
Thank you. Elizabeth, you get to answer the next question first. And the next question is, what should the state do to help homeowners in fire-prone areas who are now losing their homeowners insurance due to the fires?
Sure. So in my previous job at the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, I was the legislative coordinator for that. And we worked really hard on this issue. It had started, I know it's become more of a tsunami in the last year or two, but it has started 5 or 6 years ago. And so I met with our insurance commissioner and talked through the issue. And it turned out at that time, the insurance providers had not started to incorporate into their models the considerations for home hardening and defensible space and things that we know we are doing really well and should be considered as part of keeping our home safe. That wasn't included. So I think the first step is to ensure that those facts are included in our insurance modeling. But it also is important to understand what the options are, and including analysis of the FAIR plan, which we know is too expensive and doesn't include enough coverage, is something we need to investigate as well. There are plans out there that work, and so why can't our FAIR plan be that way also?
Thank you. Megan?
I believe there should be a certification process that the state implements so that if you have hardened your home, that they can come in, give you a certification, and you can also show that proof to your insurance agents, as well as the policy, so that there's some kind of proof that you've done the work and that the insurance companies have no reason then to not insure you.
Thank you. Patrick?
So I really think the underlying issue here is that because of the mismanagement of our force and the condition of the force, the insurance companies are in a very difficult position now because of what we've seen and what we're going to see because of mismanaged force. Over the last 50 years, fire suppression has occurred to the point today that we have so much fuels that these fires late in the season, like we're getting close to, they cannot be stopped. So for an insurance company, it's almost an impossibility to have proper insurance because of the catastrophe that's looming every year because of these fuels are too thick. And I'll put it this way, we could cut down half of the trees, entire District 1, and you're still not there yet. It's way too thick. It's not the way nature intended. It's affecting the watershed, it's affecting wildlife, and now it's affecting your insurance. We have to deal with the core problem, and the core problem is fuel reductions that have been suppressed over 50 years.
Thank you. Joe?
I completely agree with Patrick. We have to take it as a risk management perspective. We have to open up the timber industry, and we have to manage our forest. We have to tend it like it's a garden. If we treat it like with our gardens, we pull the weeds, we manage them, we prune our plants, we make sure that they're healthy, and that way they can grow strong. That way they can survive fire, they can survive drought, and they can survive bugs. What we need to do is we need to mitigate the risk. When we mitigate the risk, that will allow businesses to come back in and assume the risk of insuring customers once again. And it'd also be a good opportunity to earmark some timber proceeds to help the underfunded pension liabilities.
Thank you. Lane?
I think it is a balance between government and private business. At one point of the hand, we really need to hold private insurance businesses accountable for regulatory process, for business practices. But at the same time, we as a government need to ensure that we are keeping our forests properly maintained. We can't force government interactions to have insurance, give out insurance to homeowners in fire areas when there's 100% going to be a fire. It's a losing bet, and it's the government's responsibility to get in there and make sure that it's not a losing bet. We need to start implementing better fire prevention methods, plain and simple. We need to make residents here in Northern California safer in their homes. It should be government's responsibility tied with business, in my opinion.
Thank you. We're on to the third question, and Megan, you get to answer this question first. Should the state help provide affordable housing in California, and if so, or if not, why?
I think what the state can help do is cut regulation so that people can build homes. I've visited with the statewide building trades, and it costs $50,000 before they even break ground. That is over-regulation. And to mandate a city or a county to build affordable housing but not back that, not just with funds, but we need to cut the red tape so that the builders can go to work. Capitalism works. We just need to get government out of the way.
Thank you. Patrick?
So my first house, I couldn't afford what I would like to have lived in, and so there were some programs, and there's still programs. The DAP program is very successful, and it does help people get into a first time. And if you sold that house, you would pay that back, and then it could be reused again. So there are some successful programs that the state has in implementation today, and they do work. Obviously, the regulation and the cost of housing today is extreme, and I witnessed it firsthand at the city level of how excessive impact fees stifle growth and regulation. We saw it on our own local level, and we see state mandates that do the same thing, and those things I would like to reduce. We need to get less government, not more government. But there are still some programs that the state can do that are very helpful for first-time homeowners.
Thank you. Joe?
What I'm afraid of is price fixing. And we know from history, especially from the NRA, the National Relief Act, that happened during World War II, that fixing prices always causes prices to go up. There's no simple government solution. The government's the problem in this situation. There's too many costs and burdens with the cost of building and everything associated with it. Plus, we also need to get more industry back into California and actually have jobs that pay well. And when you have manufacturing and things where you can export products, you get a better wage, you get a better rate on your return on your labor, and you're able to afford more of these. The median income has risen above the cost of inflation since the 70s. So it's not something that we can't do and we haven't been able to do. We have to reduce the costs and figure out what's going on, and it's government. Government is killing us right now.
Thank you. Lane?
My main concern for housing development is going to be within Assembly District 1. California is simply too large of a state to have a one-size-fits-all policy, and that's exactly what's happening with housing development in our state. We need to introduce better housing development policies in rural California. In my opinion, housing regulations in San Francisco should be completely different from Redding. One of the biggest problems we worry about as homeowners here is wildfires, and if you talk to any fire chief, they'll tell you wildfires go directly up into the attic where the sprinkler systems aren't there, and that's a regulatory problem that you have when you build a home. You have to have a sprinkler system. You also, by 2020, have to have a Tesla input charger, an electric car charger built in your home, even if you don't need an electric car. It's stuff like this that we can start looking at and trying to fit better policies for rural California. I think these are issues that we aren't particularly affected by.
Thank you. Megan?
Or
Elizabeth.
Yes, the state has a number of really exceptional programs for home ownership and does have affordable housing programs as well, and those do need to be continued. We know that we have an affordable housing crisis in California. That is a big reason why people can't afford to live here. And so ensuring that the state plays a role in making sure that all of us have a place to call home is a foundational issue. We also want to make sure that local government has a say in where homes go and what they look like, how big they are even, and how they fit into the local character. And so ensuring that our local governments do have a role in that process rather than it being mandated. I do think that the state has a role in helping to fund especially affordable housing, but it has to be driven locally to make sure that it fits in with our communities and addresses the needs, especially even of our workers, the skill sets and the needs of the WUI area as well.
Thank you. Patrick, you get to answer this question first. The question is, how would you work to ensure educational funding for the public schools?
Yeah, so I was a product of public schools, and in my day they were considered quite good, and we saw a lot of good things. And so, obviously in Sacramento there are times that we can easily reach across the aisle for the benefit of District 1, and there are times that we have to be careful about reaching across the aisle when it's not beneficial for District 1. Education in public schools I do believe in. I have some great concerns with the public school system and what they're teaching today compared to when I was in school. And I think if anybody has seen what's happened over the last 30 or 40 years, there's definitely very much cause there for what they're being taught. I still believe in the system, but I am in firm belief that there needs to be changes there, because I highly disagree with some of the practices that we see today.
Thank you. Joe?
Proposition 98 has a mandatory education spending. And the problem isn't spending, the problem is standards. If we go back over 100 years, I doubt any of us could really pass an 8th grade exam. They're incredibly difficult. It was just a single small little room with a chalkboard and some books. It's about standards. It's about having good quality teachers and actually being able to get rid of the ones who aren't teaching our children properly. It's also about the curriculum that our children are learning as well. Right now, the governing board that's overseeing the state curriculum, they want to label capitalism as racist. I think that's absolutely preposterous, and it's indoctrination into children, and all they need to be worried about is their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. It's not the position of the state to mandate such indoctrination.
Thank you. Lane?
Public education is a problem that absolutely needs to be revamped, and it needs funding in order to be revamped. We know that students don't learn at the same pace. We all learn at different levels, and that's the problem with public schooling systems. They force you into an environment where you have to take your time learning with students, some slower, some quicker. One thing I'd like to do with public education is for advanced placement students, I would like to give more college credits to those individuals. So say seniors going to college, instead of having to continue doing a general education system, they could just skip completely to whatever bachelor's degree they want to go to. I also support charter schools and homeschooling as well. Like I said, I do think children learn at different paces, and that's something that really needs to start being recognized and studied.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Thank you. And the question was about school funding?
Right. How would you work to ensure educational funding for our public schools?
Sure. So I'm not sure how many people are aware that there is an initiative coming up next year called the Schools and Communities First Initiative. It is an effort to restructure Proposition 13 that mandated stable taxation on our properties. There was a loophole in that, though, for corporations in which our taxation on our properties changes every time we sell our homes. For corporations, they just need one continuous owner of that property and they can maintain their taxation rate. That means Disneyland is paying a tax of about 5 cents an acre, very different than you and I pay on our homes. That's an equity issue, and that will result in $11 billion more for our schools and communities. And so ensuring that that passes is a huge part of ensuring that our schools, which are right now among the 40% lowest funded schools, states in the nation, can really meet some of the new needs, technological and otherwise, of our students and be ready for the future.
Thank you. Megan.
So as a school board member, I pored over budgets for 4 years, and they enacted the LCAP, which was local control funding, but with mandates. So you're not really giving local control if you're telling them how to spend it. So I know that in our rural school district and many in this district, busing is an issue. We can't drive our kids to school, they can't walk, they can't ride public transportation. So we need to be funded differently in those rural school districts. Our oldest son is at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. That was not easy. There's 18 kids in his class, 52 kids in his high school. So as a parent, there's a responsibility to make sure that your child is getting all their A to G classes, as well as online AP statistics, which was not easy in Beaver. So those opportunities need to be available to all of our students, no matter where they live. And I want to work on that. I have a very passion for rural education specifically from my time on the school board, and I look forward to that opportunity.
Thank you. So the next question, Joe, you get to go first. Patrick is going to like this one. What is CalPERS unfunded pension liability, and how are we going to address this now?
I'm not familiar with the exact dollar amount of CalPERS unfunded liability. I've heard upwards of $1.2 trillion. Part of the problem is CalPERS should be in the business of securing investments for their stockholders, being the retirees. They divested out of multiple programs like firearms manufacturing stocks when they were doing really, really well because they got political. They need to stop being political and they need to focus on investment. And one way that we can come up with some of the windfall is by opening up the timber industry and earmarking some of those proceeds back into the unfunded pensions or underfunded pensions. And other problems is we got to stop trying to push all of this down onto the counties and municipalities like what happened in Loyalton. The costs are constantly increasing for these cities to do business and pay their CalPERS portions. They're increasing those to try to make it up because they can't do it themselves because they've missed management.
Thank you. Lane?
The CalPERS pension system is completely unfunded, and there's really only a couple solutions towards resolving that. In my opinion, the main solution towards fixing that problem is working with private business. At the end of the day, CalPERS is investing in private business and other stockholders to get revenue, and we're clearly not getting enough of that revenue. We need to look at business in California and identify how we can increase growth, and that with CalPERS will increase growth as well. There's a problem right now where we're, giving too much pension or too many benefits to retired employees, and we're not having enough money to fulfill those promises. And there's a couple solutions that we can work towards resolving those problems, but in my opinion, the major one would be to try and get more funding through that on a private sector, not through the government.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
So I don't think I would ever say that our CalPERS beneficiaries are getting too many benefits. What I would say, though, is that our state of California is doing an exceptional job of paying down those pension liabilities. We paid one of the largest installments in just this last budget cycle, and the last governor before Newsom, Governor Brown, has done the same thing. And so as we as a state do well, we are able to invest more in those things that we have neglected, honestly, over the past couple of decades. And so I would expect to do more of that as California does so well.
Thank you. Megan?
So they're guaranteeing 7%, they're getting 2. And the last budget cycle was $12 billion in unexpected revenue, which is your tax dollars. That money should have been spent to pay down your debt, just like you would in your business. We need to streamline government and make sure that money, when we do that, goes to pensions. They have worked in good faith, a signed contract, something that they should be guaranteed when they're 75. Someone should not find out when they're 75 that their pension is going to be cut, and they're going to have to somehow, on a very fixed income, they can't return to work. We need to make sure and ensure that they have worked for that, it is theirs, and they're going to get it. And how we're going to do that is to pay down the debt with it, not extra revenue, your taxpayers' dollars that's come in.
Thank you. Patrick?
So if we choose to do nothing, which is most likely what's going to happen, CalPERS will start failing, city after city, county after city. There simply is not enough money. Depending on the actuarials that you pay for, you're either 25, 30, 35, even up to 40% unfunded. What will happen when those start to fail is those retirements will simply be cut that amount. That is what happened in Loyalton. Now they got a little bit of a bailout there, but they're a very small town, and I guarantee you the larger towns will not get a bailout. They're not going to pass the debt from Stockton over to the rest of the CalPERS employees. It's not going to happen. The fact of the matter is that what system that they've created, the wealth is not there. So there's a variety of ways to fix it. A progressive scale that helps the lower wage earner, and moving that to a higher position is a possibility. But talking about it, discussing it today, will help stop the problem from occurring. If we do nothing, which is about what they've been doing, Band-Aids, in about 5 years it will fail.
Thank you. Next question. This is number 6. Lane, you're first. The question is, how would you increase funding for mental health services? And I want to distinguish that from the next question, which will be, how would you increase funding for substance use treatment? So just mental health on this question.
Well, one of my main platforms is going to be creating state mental health programs that gives individuals the proper care they need to get mental health. I think a huge problem with that right now is we're forcing it onto private hospitals who really aren't equipped towards having these people with mental health problems. I think California needs to look at their budgetary problems overall, and I think there's a lot of ways we can cut costs to increase spending on core infrastructural problems that we face right here in California. For example, the high-speed rail. We need to look at these projects that are too idealistic and cut those so we can work on solving core inherent problems of this state.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Mental health care is an issue that's been plaguing California ever since Reagan had to close the mental health facilities in the 70s, 60s. And it's something that is of particular import in our rural regions. People are more isolated. They don't have as much connection with the outside world. And so I think one of the most important things we can do is to start investment in mental health care at a young age, making sure that our schools have nurses, have counselors, have psychiatrists available, to make sure that we know people in our community who need help and are able to pass them through that sort of continuum of care that is available right now.
Thank you. Megan?
Yes, the state needs to partner with local government elected officials as well as sheriffs, mental health, to come alongside people who need help. There's a lot of mentally ill on our streets that don't need to be there. So I want to come alongside them as the state. There's ways that we can find funding for this by cutting other programs that are unnecessary and come in to support our mental health. Also, education. As soon as there are no more counselors in schools, they've cut all of the counselors. So we need school nurses and counselors, and that's something that we can find the funds to do that. We need to invest in our children right away, as well as our mentally ill who cannot take care of themselves.
Thank you. Patrick?
So I really think this ties into really what I've been talking about all night, is that this is a function for us here in Shasta County. Obviously, it's a function for Shasta County. If you take a look at their budget, look how much is going to these unfunded pensions, and it's tying their hands on doing their core responsibilities, including mental health. And so you have to deal with the core problem. And I think it's incorrect to say we need to get more money from the state or tax you more. The county has enough money to solve this problem, but it's how they're spending that money. And they have runaway costs within their budget because of the pension problem that they can't do their core responsibilities that you've paid for. That's your tax dollars. You've paid for that, but you're not getting it because the counties are not managing their budgets correctly. They've let their pensions get out of control, and it's affecting mental health in every county, not just our county, but every single county has this problem. Their money is there, but it's how you spend it is the problem.
Thank you. Joe?
I'm a disabled combat veteran, and I've struggled with PTSD and anxiety and major depressive disorder for years. I self-medicated for an entire year after I came home from Afghanistan. I was drunk every single day. This is not a money problem. This is understanding mental health. This is understanding why we're depressed. Part of one reason why we're depressed is because we have our kids constantly on these damn things getting dopamine fixes, and it's creating a lot of apathy, and it's messing them up. Dopamine's a very addictive substance. We have to know what is going on, why we're being depressed, what's causing it, and we have to try to take corrective actions as a society. This is not something that government can fix, but there are things that government can implement. In the military, we have resiliency training, where it's a course of therapy type sessions or mindfulness, or it's disciplinary exercise to try to strengthen your mental health before you go to war. That way you don't come back broken from it.
Thank you. Elizabeth, you have the next question first. And this is a very similar question. How would you find the money and services to treat the substance use treatment problems that we know we have in California?
Sure. So often on our streets and in our homes, the folks who end up with substance abuse problems are ones who are self-medicating for some other reason. So certainly in part addressing the mental health issue crisis in this state is incredibly important. But in addition to that, in many communities, we jail those people who are high or drunk on our streets. And while that may be a fast fix to get them out of the public eye, it's not the compassionate or the proactive way to handle it. We need to ensure that those folks have ability to access services, to empower them to learn new things through education opportunities, and to have jobs available for them to be a productive member of society. Nobody in our community does not want to be a productive member of society. It's having the opportunity.
Thank you. Megan?
Again, there's money in the budget to help our mentally ill. It's just our priorities of where we spend our taxpayers' dollars. If our mentally ill are being cared for with compassion, they will become members of our society and be giving back. So again, we just have to find that money. We can streamline things like the DMV. There's ways to streamline government to act more, run as a business like we do, and that we'll find the money. And I'm excited to talk and have solutions and conversations to come up with a true solution to these issues.
Thank you. Patrick?
So it's a very similar question to the last question. Let me put it in perspective. So for the Reading Police Department, let's go back to about 2008. They had a $25 million budget with 143 police personnel, roughly, in 2008. Fast forward today, we have a little over $30 million budget and less employees. So we have almost $6 million more and less employees. Where's it all going? It's going to pensions. That's $5 to $6 million out of the local budget that can't be used for anything else. So there's your fix to so many problems, but if you can't manage your budget, you can't take care of your core responsibilities that government is supposed to provide to you.
Thank you. Joe?
This directly ties into self-medication is one of the biggest problems. We have to be able to reduce the cost of healthcare for people to be able to get the treatment. We have to be able to remove the social stigma of, I'm depressed, I'm scared to go outside, I want to kill myself. It's something that can be overcome. We lose a lot of veterans to suicide daily. It's an epidemic, and there's no reason that we need to fall into a cookie cutter mentality on this. We need to address this as a society. We need our elected representatives to have a bully pulpit to talk about it. We need people to go and speak to kids about this within our schools. The schools need to be responsible primarily for resiliency training. and training them to have a strong body and a strong mind. That way they can be prepared for those things. Addiction is a very, very difficult thing to overcome. But as long as we can reduce the costs on things and get people the proper treatment for their mental health, it's going to go a lot further than any law or arrest or bill or budget that it's ever going to do.
Thank you. Lane?
In terms of fundraising, this question does lie hand in hand with the other question. The hugest problem with substance abuse does lie within rehabilitation. From the moment an individual suffering from substance abuse is picked up till the moment they get their first job, we need to create rehabilitation services for those individuals so they can recover from whatever problem they're facing, whether it be mental illness or some other form of addiction. We need to have rehabilitation programs. When you're going to a private hospital, you're in a loud environment where people are yelling and screaming. That's not the type of place for people suffering from mental illness or substance abuse to be. We need to create facilities that allow them to recover, and then after recovery, get into rehabilitation, finding jobs, getting back into society, having affordable housing. Those are the right solutions towards addressing substance abuse and mental illness.
Thank you. Next question, Megan, you're first. What gun control measures do you support?
We have a lot of laws on the books already in the state of California. There are currently 20,000 felons who have illegal firearms. I think we need to start there. We don't need to take guns out of law-abiding citizens' hands. We are pro-Second Amendment family. We hunt. We kill what we eat. So we are very pro-Second Amendment. And the laws are there. We just need to implement them.
Thank you. Patrick?
So I have 40 years of experience in this area, and I can tell you we have far too many more laws than we need, and they're not effective. The crime is continuing. I'll say it this way. We do not have a gun problem in America. We have a violent crime problem in America. And the more we want to try to attack the gun, these problems will continue. You can take all the guns away. This criminal behavior will continue, and it'll get more aggressive because you're not dealing with the core issues of crime. Lack of parenting, violence in movies, violence in video games, the education system. It's a lack of a societal, it's a breakdown of our morals. It's not a gun issue. It's simply not a gun issue, and I have a vast amount of experience in this, and I'm going to work hard in Sacramento to try to teach my colleagues that there are some sensible things. I believe in background checks, but we have more laws in California than almost all the other states put together. It doesn't work. And we just need to work on real crime issues.
Thank you. Joe?
I don't think the audience is going to like this, but gun control means using both hands. There are no laws that are going to stop someone from using a tool to murder somebody. We don't have the violence epidemic that everybody thinks we do. The perception is too high. Pew's already done research on this, and they've proven, not just with the FBI crime statistics, but with their own studies, that people's perception of crime is far greater than the reality. Violent crime has decreased steadily for decades. It doesn't matter if you have all the rifles, all the shotguns of all types, models, calibers, anything else. Hands and feet kill more people annually than all of those scary guns combined. The Second Amendment says the right of the people shall not be infringed, not the right of the state, not the right of the militia. It's a prohibition on government. It doesn't give us permission to do anything. If anything, the government doesn't have any authority over it. And honestly, all these laws are unconstitutional, and I have no problem standing up against them.
Thank you. Lane?
Forgive me, was this gun laws that I would support? Was that the question?
What gun control measures do you support?
I am very pro Second Amendment. However, personally, I am completely comfortable with the idea of having to wait 2 to 3 weeks to make sure that responsible gun owners are getting the firearms. I also am very pro for getting illegal firearms off the market. I also think we need to start holding individuals more accountable for the actions of others. As a responsible gun owner, you need to make sure that you are holding your gun in a safe location. If another individual accesses that firearm, then you are responsible for some of the devastation that they cause, and you should be held more accountable. I'm disappointed with the lack of accountability when we hear of these mass shootings and school shootings of individuals getting firearms from their parents, and their parents just leaving the guns unexposed. That is not responsible gun ownership. And gun ownership, you need to be responsible.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Thank you. As the only Democrat up here, I'm sure some of you will be shocked to hear that I am not opposed to the Second Amendment. We live in a rural community. We do a lot of hunting. We have animals that are vulnerable out in the wild. And so it's really important that those rights be maintained. The kind of gun control measures that I would be in support of is we need to look much more closely at those weapons that are created to kill people. Weapons that have magazines that are in excess of what we allow for going hunting, for shooting wild waterfowl. So I think we need to think harder about sort of the scale of what guns are out there, what do we actually need, what is the history of the allowance here in the United States, and not walking on the rights of those who have that as a cultural norm, certainly, and the norms that are here in the state and important for our rural communities.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, you're going to answer the next question first, and the next question is, California is labeled as being the state with the highest poverty levels in the whole United States. I'm actually going to give you 2 minutes for this question, because poverty is a big deal. So maybe about the statistics, and statistics are a little loose, but 1 in 5 live in poverty in California. Can you talk to me about what you can do about that as an assembly person?
You know, so I refer to this, or I look at this as a District 1 issue. That's what we represent, and if you take a look at the counties in District 1, poverty is an issue. But I really believe that when you get government out of the way, you're going to be seeing great improvements in county after county, city after city. You know, I spent 8 years on the Reading City Council, and I watched conditions that would be considered to be no growth or slow growth, and it holds people down. And what we should have had is a vibrant economy here, but it's stagnant. In fact, Reading has lost 10% of population, and I've known a ton of folks in the construction world, and they've had to go elsewhere to get work. And the city played a role in that, just like the state is playing a role today by having excess regulation, and it's hurting folks and it's creating less job opportunities. I truly believe that we have too much government, and government is in the way, and it's stifling productivity. I say it this way. Let's say we were in the state that was the freest state in the union. Do you think it would be a poor state? I believe it would not. And I certainly believe District 1 would not be as poor as it is if we could reduce the regulation in Sacramento and get people back working. People can take care of themselves, but they can't do it when there's massive regulation. We're losing our folks. They're leaving California at an all-time rate because of what they're doing in Sacramento through excess regulation and taxes. We have to reduce that trend.
Thank you. Joe?
We have to identify what poverty is and what it is not. For anybody who's been around the world and been overseas, I know Megan's been to Egypt. I spent a year there with the military. We talked about this recently. I've seen and smelled real poverty. We have to understand what that is like, and we have to understand that poverty cannot be defined merely based off of an income bracket. It's an arbitrary designation. You have to know what real poverty is. And unfortunately, we do have the highest poverty level in California. But if we looked at Singapore, which is a wonderful example, they used to be a third world nation. They embraced liberty, and then they became a first world nation. There's a lot of wealth in Singapore. I embrace the ideology like Benjamin Franklin had when he said that he wants to make the poor uncomfortable in their poverty, because the more handouts that he's seen from government, the less people did for themselves. I'm all for a welfare state to help people with a hand up when they're in need, but that's something that we do on our own. I prefer charity for that. But the biggest thing we have to do is we have to identify what is real poverty, and then we have to get the government out of the way of the economy. Our California is supposedly now the 5th largest economy in the world, yet we've lost over $50 billion in wages while getting 9 million more residents in our state. That tells you that ranking is a facade, and people need to realize that things are happening around the world and California's image isn't quite what it is. The best way to reduce poverty is you open up the markets. You get people working. You give them a reason to work. You give people a reason to invest their money, invest their capital, and invest their labor, and the jobs will come. Money's like water. It travels the path of least resistance. We have too many regulations and too many government roadblocks in California. If we pull them back, we get a new state, we do something to get government out of the way, we're going to have far more investment.
Thank you. Lane?
I think there are different forms of poverty, but we really need to start looking at first world poverty in terms of the United States and compare our poverty to other states. And I do think, as California being one of the most populous and leading states and economies, we truly are suffering and compared to other states like Texas, for example. And I think that is a huge problem with the mismanagement of California's resources brought on by our state government. We need the solution to solving poverty is housing development. The solution to solving poverty is working towards creating business-friendly environments in the state of California. These are the solutions we really need to work on, and right here in Assembly District 1, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to address issues that are causing poverty and find ways towards fixing those solutions. We need to really look at our budget and start putting more finances into the infrastructure of the state of California, having better water reservoir systems, having opportunities to start a business without having to worry about California trying to do a split roll tax, which is going to separate housing development property tax from business property tax. And they want to be able to annually adjust how much they think your business is worth. That's going to completely destroy business here in California. It's going to make California business owners move to bordering states. That's going to continue to destroy our economy. It's going to hurt everyone in California, and we're not going to see improvements in our poverty until we try to address these issues.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to poverty in California. We know that our bottom 20% have simply gotten poorer over the last 10 years, while the top 5% have gotten more wealthy. And so the two components to that I wanted to talk about is in part healthcare. We know that a significant number of our population go into poverty because of either a lack of health care or inadequate health insurance. And so addressing that issue through ensuring that people have access to health care that is affordable and covers them when they need to be covered is really important. The second part of that is the inequity issue. The statistics I cited a minute ago are pretty significant, and a lot of business growth is happening actually on the backs of us, the taxpayers, through extremely high subsidies. There are corporations here in California that do not pay taxes here in California. Large corporations, ones that you would know the name of. While at the same time, our hardworking business owners, including businesses here in Redding, pay a very significant amount of their taxes to the state of California. How is that equitable? And so ensuring that we can cover the needs that we have in a growing and inclusive society, making sure that we do have health care, making sure that we have affordable housing, making sure that there are safety nets for people who need them, but also enough opportunity to make sure that folks can move up with their self-drive and their will and with good education. That has to be addressed through some of the inequity issues, and we need to stop subsidizing some of the largest businesses in the state.
Thank you. Megan?
So specifically to the district, our poverty rate has a great deal to do with lack of economy. So in our town, we no longer have a mill, and that's throughout the entire district. The wood mills are gone. The timber industry has been devastated by 20 years of policies coming out of Sacramento. So if we open up our forests, lower the regulations, and be able to clean out them, our capitalism will rise in those areas specifically. As well as in the classroom, in the high schools, we need more CTE classes. We need to encourage children that trade jobs are good jobs. They mean careers for them. Not everyone is destined to go to a 4-year university. We need to invest in our youth, and part of that will bring them out of poverty if they know there's other options for them. There's so many children that just give up, or they start they come to Shasta, they make it through a semester, and then that's it. They need more, and they need to know what is available to them. And we can work with the trades. We can work with private industries to come into our high schools and give them options. Statewide, they need to know what's available to them. And that will mean good paying jobs for them. So as a business owner, the minimum wage, the ag overtime bill were devastating for our business. Now, I know everyone thinks everyone should have a great start wage. A minimum wage is a starting job. That is not something that you're going to hopefully try to take care of your family on. But when we start employees and kids come to work for us, I can't babysit them for $15 an hour. That is not an option. So what did we do? We hire our sons. That's what we do. So instead of growing as a business, it's actually taken jobs away by pushing those things. And the ag overtime bill, you just haven't felt it yet, but you will. Your tomatoes will be $4 a piece.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. Joe, you're first on the next question. So I think you'll like this question. The children are our future, and we invest in them in a variety of ways. Can you tell me what you think we need to really address first when we start talking about our youth? What is the most important thing to you?
The most important thing to me as far as the youth is role models and mentorship. It's something that it's not confined to a classroom. It's not confined to a family. It's something that we can do as a society. It doesn't cost us anything other than what we give to those children. So I believe that children need a hand up in certain situations from an outside person, such as a mentor. We have one of the biggest problems with the crime and poverty rates is we have a lack of family unity. We don't have enough family households together to rear those children and to give them the guidance and the dichotomy of a mother and a father that they really need. And I've honestly, before I even had my daughter, I spent over $10,000 in charity sponsoring an orphan girl in Kabul, Afghanistan. So children need opportunities. We have tons of them. We need to be able to be there for them when they're in need. As people and as citizens, it's not the role of government to solve.
Thank you. Lane?
Involvement. Involvement is the number one issue, in my opinion, for people of my generation and the generation that has come after me to get involved. Look around you. How many young people do we have here today trying to get involved in our political processes? Working for Senator Gaines and being a part of the Shasta County Central Committee, that's one of the biggest challenges that I've seen thus far. When I was 18, I was alone in a sea of far older people than me, and it was intimidating. And I think this community offers so much to younger individuals. It's just those younger individuals don't know how to get involved and don't know how to get engaged. And it's responsible for people like us running today to get that involvement. One thing I've done is I've created a Young Republican group here in Reading that's gotten individuals more involved and engaged in processes that they didn't think that they could do. Your vote does matter, and that's a problem that we have with today's youth. They don't think it does. We need to elect legislators that are more connected socially with today's society to get more involvement passed on.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
In many cases, schools are the place where kids get the most of their upbringing. In many families, those parents work 2 jobs and aren't able to parent as actively as they would like to. We're expecting more and more of our schools. And so my core of investing in our children is investing in our schools, ensuring that kids have an access to what real work looks like. I never had a class in high school or before that really showed me what job opportunities there were, other than the traditional, doctor, lawyer, teacher. It's really important that kids know what options are out there, and making sure that they can get involved young and early is incredibly important.
Thank you. Megan?
So education, obviously, we need to be in our schools. You need to volunteer, mentor. That's a big thing, is to be a mentor for a child. And we've done that. And I so love it at our house when it's full of teenagers and they're all playing basketball in your backyard. It's the best. Because those are those opportunities to have conversation about their futures. What are they going to do? So if you don't have children, find one. Find one to get involved in. They need you. They need the generations that are coming up to come alongside them. Our middle son is the state FFA vice president. We strongly believe in organizations like the FFA. They offer CTE classes, certified technical education, and kids that learn hands-on, that's how they create community. So those organizations, find one, get involved. All of our youth need you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Well, obviously parenting, I guess I was very lucky in that I had great parents, and I had a very loving mother and a very strict father, and taught us good work ethic, and so I was lucky. But at school, in the local schools here, I went to Rother, I went to there for all my elementary schools, and I remember Officer Don Ostendorf would come around with his shepherd and sing songs, and you know, things like that really left a lasting impression. One year I was a little bit slow on learning, and so they kept me after school to get me up to speed, and it really helped the following years. So the education system, you know, obviously in those years it took each child, you know, seriously. Each child was looked at and worked on and not left behind. And we need to get back to that today. So many kids today are being left behind, and they become the problems of the future. And so obviously I was lucky I had great parents, but besides that, or as an alternative, our schools can do a tremendous amount, but we have to get back to a little slower pace than what we're at today.
Thank you. Lane, you're first on the next question, and the next question is, do you support the increased use of renewable energy in our state, and do you have proposals to continue in that direction?
I support it in healthy levels. I don't think we should push away any sources of fuels that continues to increase the poverty of California. However, I'm 100% for renewable energies. One thing I think would be a great resource is removing ground fuels and using those ground fuels for renewable energies. And those are the kind of energies that I want to look at and address as a assemblyman.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yes, 100%. We have seen many states in our nation go towards renewable energy, Wyoming in particular, that has only enhanced their economy. What I would add to the suite of renewable energy is biomass energy in particular. We know that we used to have a pretty vibrant economy in our North State based in part on that biomass energy production. It was usually co-located with a timber facility. We need to look at that again. Bioenergy in many cases is not economically viable without co-location. And so looking at certainly timber production facilities, but also new technologies, cross-laminated timber, nanofiber technology, things that are done in other places that we could do here. We need to create economies, create incentives to do more of that, and to enhance our economy through that renewable energy source.
Thank you. Megan?
We subsidize solar to the point that we pay other states to take our electricity. Solar is over-subsidized. Biomass is definitely something we need to invest in, because if we remove the fuels out of the forest, it has to go somewhere. We can't leave that fuel on the floor. It's just a tinderbox. So I would propose that we would up our biomass significantly to remove those fuels and to make energy and use it as a resource.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yes, so I would support certainly biomass, but over the years as we've moved logging out of the woods, also that has affected the biomass. And even for the city of Reading, we converted our biomass plants, our energy plants, our power plants to natural gas because the chips weren't available and the biomass wasn't available. And so we'd like to go back to that. What I'm not in favor of is so-called green power, like wind turbines. And these are highly subsidized. They are not the future. We have a big problem here in Shasta County. We have a 38,000 acre project scheduled, and the good folks up there in Round Mountain are fighting it hard. And you know, there are good things with biomass, and it's available to us, and it can come back. But some of this green stuff is not green at all. In fact, in Siskiyou County, we have 4 dams, 3 dams in Siskiyou County, and 1 in Oregon, where these environmental extremists want to remove them, and they're producing good green power. We just have our priorities very wrong in Sacramento.
Thank you. Joe?
I like to look at everything from a strategic level, and I want us to have actual renewable energy. We can't rely on lithium mines. They're atrocious. We need hydroelectric dams. Hydroelectric power is clean. It runs continuously. The sun's not always out. Solar power is great when it works, but it's not always out. Wind power, the wind's not always blowing. One thing we also have is we have geothermal. The core temperature of the Earth is always at a consistent temperature. We also have various volcanic activities, especially up in District 1, that we can have geothermal plants. We need to do these things. Also, of course, biomass and clearing out the dead biomass from our forests is exceptionally easy, and there we can do it if we open up the forests again. So I look at it from a strategic level. I think California should be energy independent and have its own grid system, just like Texas does, because our grid is vulnerable, and if it's hacked and it shuts down, only Texas will have lights, and that's unfortunate.
Thank you. Elizabeth, you get to answer the next question first. Do you support or oppose closing the corporate loophole in Proposition 13, and why?
Yes, I spoke to the Schools and Communities First initiative earlier, and I absolutely support that. It is not equitable the way that Proposition 13 has been applied throughout our state. And so addressing that loophole will help us to fund things that we care deeply about, and will help our corporate partners to be better citizens and better partners in the state of California, helping to build a stronger society.
Thank you. Megan?
I would vote to support Prop 13 as is.
Thank you. Patrick?
And for me, the same thing. As you know, Proposition 13 has to do with your property tax, and the state is constantly looking at ways of taking more money from you. And so every time they want to talk about Prop 13, it's not talking about reducing the level of tax, it's talking about increasing it, and there's going to be winners and losers, so I would not support changing it from what we have today.
Thank you. Joe?
I absolutely do not support changing Prop 13 unless we're eliminating property taxes in general, because there is when you're being taxed on your property, you don't own it. You don't have real property when you're paying taxes on it. You can laugh all you want, it's true. If you are taxed on it, you don't own it. You're paying rent to the government. We have enough economic activity that we can generate other sources of revenue for the state to facilitate those functions. It doesn't have to come from paying people on their property and actually forcing them to pay rent to the government.
Thank you. Lane?
I also support Prop 13 where it is right now.
Thank you. The next question, Megan, you're going to answer this question first. Water is a big issue in California. Could you tell us what the issues are in your thinking, and what role the legislature has to address those issues and how they might be addressed? I think this is a 2-minute question. You think water is a 2-minute question? Yeah.
Yes, water is very complicated, and it's the lifeblood of our communities. As you know, the North State is a watershed for the rest of the state. So first of all, we need to take care of our watersheds, which I know we've all said this multiple times, but removing the fuels from the forest will open up our watersheds. It's like pulling weeds. When you pull weeds, more water will come. I fully support water storage. Some of us may still remember the drought. It's not been that long ago, but then it starts to rain, and we seem to kind of forget that we need more water. Millions of acre feet go to the ocean every year. And we need to capture that water, and we need to be prepared for the next cycle. And so I am very pro water storage. I am not for removing the Klamath dams. I'd like to set that record straight today, on record, live stream. I'm not for removing those dams. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
So obviously water is a big issue, and you know, for us in District 1, we have a lot of water, but when you have 40 million people in the state of California, the South wants our water, and they'd like to change the relationship and the agreements that we have. Like the city of Redding has a pre-1914 water agreement, and they're constantly working on such things as that. It's true that as you manage your force and you start reducing those fuels, you have a tremendous amount of water today that's trapped in District 1 in the trees that should not be there, and is creating vast amount of fuels, and we see those problems. By removing vast amounts of trees and getting the forest back to its normal healthy condition, you're going to increase every creek and every river in District 1. And in essence, that water will all flow south. So you would think it would be advantageous to Sacramento to start taking a look at that. But there's very little common sense in Sacramento to figure out solutions that will help them. They're constantly attacking us, and every time we have a drought, the water issue becomes very important. And how valuable is your property if you're on a well when your well goes dry? Aquifers all over Northern California are shrinking because of the issue of mismanaged forests, and the price per acre foot, when we get into the next drought, the price goes higher and higher, and you start seeing things happen, and you start seeing deals being done where water is sent to the south. And we've seen it in Redding in the last drought, and we're probably going to see it again. So we have to fight hard. We need a fighter today on water. Water is an extremely important and valuable commodity in the south. The South has too many people for how much water is available to them. They need to take our water, so we have to fight extra hard for this issue.
Thank you. Joe?
It's been said that whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. It's an important issue. It's something that goes along with our property rights and our personal rights and everything else. We have water rights. The state right now, they want to regulate or they want to monitor our groundwater consumption. Especially, it's been talked about even in just for home residents and not for large irrigation practices. The big problem is it's 2019. Why are we still dealing with this nonsense when we have technology? We can and should be investing more in desalination, taking water from the oceans and getting our fresh water source. There's no reason why we can't do it. We have to have a will, and we have to be able to do it. I always go back to risk management and strategic options for it. It's a strategic option. If something happens to the aqueduct going down to Southern California, they're in a lot of hurt. A lot of people can die if we have a huge tragedy up here in the North State that prevents our water from getting to them. They should be able to produce their own fresh water down where they are, since 70% of the planet is covered in water and the majority of them live on the coastal areas.
Thank you. Lane?
California farmers are plagued with water regulatory practices, and the huge problem that stems from that is our inability to hold this water. We really need to improve our water storage systems, and it is a problem with our southern counterparts. We have a lot of water up here in the North State. It's a matter of how we go about getting that down south. And California doesn't want to invest in the infrastructure to improve water storages all throughout our state, and that's the one solution towards resolving our water problems right here. It's having more water on storage for when we face crises such as the drought.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
So water resources is an area I've spent nearly 20 years on, from a local perspective, a regional perspective, a statewide perspective, and I'm incredibly passionate about. We have an exceptional opportunity with the new governor's realignment of the Water Fix project. It's gone from, in his mind at least, 2 tunnels to 1. Now we in Northern California could celebrate that, thinking that maybe less will be shipped south. We don't know that yet, though. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what rules and regulations are going to be around that. We don't know what water rights are going to be applied. So we need to really have somebody in Sacramento who understands the opportunities inherent in restructuring the Water Fix project, as well as the opportunities exactly here in our district, in Assembly District 1. And so it was mentioned, the watershed management, certainly that's important, but it's also really important to look at protecting our water resources here where we are. And some of that is ensuring that the state work collaboratively with farmers and ranchers and environmental groups and communities to really better understand how groundwater and surface water interacts in our spaces. California, just in the last 10 years, established its first groundwater law. That law, though, still doesn't recognize interaction between groundwater and surface water. And so that's another issue that we really need to address, is how those two important resources that we use groundwater to store as well as to pump, right, for consumptive use. And so ensuring that we understand that interaction between groundwater and surface water is another important element.
Thank you. Patrick, question for you. What proposals do you have that can help California alleviate the effects of climate change?
Well, first, the climate is changing, if you haven't figured that out. Take a look at California. 12,000 years ago, it was covered in ice. And so this continent and our state and our district has been warming for a long time. So the climate has been continuing to warm, and it'll continue to warm. Now, have humans increased that? Quite possibly. But the fact still remains that the climate is warming and has been for a long time. We do not have statistics that will say that it's going to cool down or continue at this rate. They're making those assumptions, and I think they're incorrect assumptions, and they're changing in a very short time instead of through attrition how people operate and run their businesses today based on, I consider, data that is false and misleading with regards to climate change. And so we have to be very careful with climate change. That word is used an awful lot, and it's very harmful for a variety of businesses.
Thank you. Joe?
The environment is dynamic. It's not static. It's never going to stay the same. So we have to be able to anticipate change. We have to be able to change with change. We also have to identify where the changes come from. The majority of the changes come from our solar system. It's a lot bigger than we are. And I know some people can laugh and scoff about that, but the sun is a gigantic fusion reactor in the middle of our solar system that provides the majority of heat and energy to our planet. Now, knowing that, NASA has also recently released a satellite imagery showing that the Earth is greening. Because CO2 levels have risen, it's plant food. The way that we control that is, I guess, we plant more plants. Do we plant slow-growing plants? Do we plant fast-growing plants? What do we do? Is there an industry to help with it? Or will a tax, taking of someone's money and giving it to someone else, will that actually affect the climate? It's not going to affect the climate. It's a scam.
Thank you. Lane?
It is in my opinion that climate change is real. The problem that lies within that is responsible development to ensure that we are implementing new ideologies and technologies that still help constituents in this district not be plagued with poverty, but at the same time promoting different biofuel energies that makes our environment a better place to live. I think as an assemblyman, one of the hugest problems would be tackling global climate change. One of my issues and my platforms are going to stay to my inherent issues of public safety, disaster relief, and development during my time in the assembly. While I look at different bills and technologies towards affecting climate change, that's not something I personally would implement as your assemblyman.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
So as a scientist and as just a person in this world, I don't know that climate change is something we believe or don't believe. The science is real. And so on top of that, though, and perhaps even more importantly, I also believe that it doesn't matter what you believe about climate change. The solutions that we're talking about are things that are good for all of us. So things like taking care of our forests, that is a climate action. Things like investing in renewable energy and innovations that employ more people in our community, that's a climate change action. Things that the state of California has been doing and continues to do and is a leader in the nation and in the world on the climate front, as well as what drives us to be the 5th largest economy in the nation.
Thank you. Megan?
Yes, the climate is changing. To the degree that man is affecting that, if we're regulating our lawnmowers and our weed eaters, and for us, mandating us to get a new semi-truck when the one we have works just fine, to put filters on it that don't work. But one catastrophic wildfire emits more carbon than taking every car off the road for 1 year in the state of California. The real issue is and they don't even, that's not even part of the equation. That carbon is real, and it needs to be part of what we look at and how we take care of our climate and our environment.
Thank you. Okay, Joe, it's your turn. Who do you look up to and why? Who's your hero or heroine?
One of my heroes is Thomas Jefferson. I know it's cliche, but the man was brilliant, grew up in a time where we had a lot of turmoil, and he brought a lot of inspiration to a lot of people in order for us to decide to choose a life of liberty over being servants and subjects of the crown. A lot of people don't know that the original Declaration of Independence actually included slavery as one of the original grievances, but it was taken out because the other colonies would not sign on to it, and it had to be the unanimous declaration. And so a lot of people get villainized throughout history, and that's someone who I greatly look up to because of the courage to actually be willing to be killed by the crown for what they believe in.
Thank you. Lane?
My personal hero is a man by the name of Dave Muir. Dave is a local Reading resident who used to work for Congressman Wally Herder and also worked for Senator Ted Gaines. When I got into working with Senator Gaines, it was Dave that discovered me and got me involved in local politics. If it wasn't for Dave Muir, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. Dave has done above and beyond and has truly shown me what it means to be a staffer, to be dedicated to your community. And it's people like Dave that we need in this district to help promote effective policy. And that's one thing I would like to take from the teachings of Dave Muir and help with this district.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
So this is maybe a little bit of a personal story. I went to a parent participation preschool, and while I certainly don't remember experiencing this myself, my mom told me the story later. She came in for her volunteer day and saw me in the schoolyard with a bunch of other little girls, and she asked the teacher, she said, we need to talk with Elizabeth. She's being awfully bossy out there. And I will admit to that. My siblings certainly will admit to that. And the response of my preschool teacher was, isn't it wonderful that Elizabeth is leading? And so I would say that I honor the teachers and the parents out there that really foster the self-confidence and honor the individuality of each student that they come in contact with.
Thank you. Megan?
I would say my hero is my 93-year-old grandmother, Virginia Ray. Stubbornness has got her to be 93 years old. And through her 93 years, and I've been blessed to have our children have great grandparents in their life, so they've been able to hear history and years of things that they've seen. You know, she watches our children on iPads and she's like, what? Oh, goodness. So, but she's phenomenal. Her faith and her perseverance, and something that she always she's so proud of me, and she's always pushing us forward, each one of us, each one of her 10 grandchildren. But her pride for us is something that I just love, and it's something that I pass down to my own children as I watch them grow and thrive. And she just brings so much peace and comfort to me because I know that she's right behind me every day, praying for me and pushing me forward.
Thank you. Patrick?
So my hero is my father. My dad was a migrant farm worker back in the 40s, and he brought himself out of that, got into the military, learned to be a tool and die maker, started his own business, raised a family in the 50s and 60s, and he really lived the American dream, and he taught me how to work hard. He taught all the children how to work hard and be successful. And if you learned a trade, no matter where you would go, you could take care of yourselves. And so I often think about my father and wishing I could go back to his time instead of this time. And, but he was a hard worker, and he was strict. He didn't speak a lot to the kids in the manner that we might see today, but you knew the love was there. It was a strict type of love, but he'll always be my hero.
Thank you. I think that we'll move to closing comments now. And so, Lane, you will go first. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you everyone again for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak with you tonight. Like I said, the reason I wanted to run in the first place was because I've seen so many issues go unaddressed in this district, and it's my hope that I can work towards resolving these issues. When I'm not in Sacramento fighting for you, I'm going to be right here in this district, working firsthand with different groups, organizations, city officials to make sure that you get the best representation that you deserve. This is going to be a full-time job to me. I'm going to put all of my time and effort into making sure that the constituents of this district get the best representation they deserve. I love my home. I love Reading. And I want to see changes brought to this area so we can bring more people to experience the beauty that we have here from Mount Shasta to Shasta Lake. I hope you support me come August 27th, and I'm really excited for this campaign that we're running together. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth, 3 minutes.
Thank you for your questions tonight. Just based on the questions alone, I think you can see that the breadth of issues facing us here in Assembly District 1 and in the state of California is extreme. And I believe that what you want in your state assembly person is somebody who has not only experience in some of the high priority issues like forestry and watersheds and wildfire, but also experience in the other things of life. Understanding what it means to bring more opportunity to a region, understanding what it means to expand job availability, investment and innovation, and really a new voice to speak up for the things that we care about here in our community. I'm running to be a partner with this region. I pledge, absolutely, as your assembly member, to see you regularly. This is a vast district, but it takes dedication and travel and really just being there to ensure that it's not my ideas that are represented, it's your ideas. It's being a partner with all of you here in this community and throughout this massive assembly district. And so, in conclusion, I look forward to partnering with you. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, your priorities, and I look forward to leading in the assembly and partnering with those who I've worked with before and been an advocate to and with. So thank you for your support, and I look forward to getting your vote on August 27th.
Thank you. Megan?
Thank you so much for this evening and this opportunity. I'm honored to have the Reading Chamber of Commerce endorsement as well as the statewide Farm Bureau because we are farmers. I'm very excited about that endorsement. California is the 5th largest economy in the world, yet we have the highest poverty rate, as we've discussed, the 2nd largest homelessness rate, the second lowest home ownership rate, and the highest fuel cost. We did not get there overnight. These are policies that have come out of Sacramento for decades. We can still turn the state around, and I'm excited for that opportunity. I'm running for a stronger and safer North State. I'm running for our children, our neighbors, and our communities, and I will be a strong voice in Sacramento. I can start day one to go to work, and I know I've built those relationships that will matter, and I can bring results to the district. I'm Megan Dahle, and I would be honored to have your vote.
Thank you. Patrick?
You know, so for me, 40 years in the private sector in a small business, and then 8 years of elected service on the Reading City Council. And if you take a look at most of your legislatures today in Sacramento, most of them have experience in local governing bodies, be it a city council or the county. And that's very valuable time well spent learning the local problems, because those are really the same types of problems, just expanded, that we see in Sacramento. Having that type of experience is very important, and most of your legislatures have that type of experience. I am the most experienced person in this race, not only in small businesses, and I'm still running that small business today, and the elected representation from City Council, you know, we went through a global recession at City Hall, and so it was a very tough time, and that at the time seemed like a curse that we had to deal with these tough issues and declining revenues and dealing with 10 labor organizations. But looking back, it was really the best thing for me, dealing with very tough, adverse times, because we went through that, and I served with integrity, with leadership, and those are the types of things that I expect, and I expect greatness from all of our legislatures. We all owe our districts an amount of attention that I believe they're not getting today. I think today more than ever, as we get out into the district, whether it's Siskiyou County or Modoc County or Nevada County, they're looking for something different. They're not happy with the direction this state is going. They're looking for a fighter. I believe I am just that person. I am Patrick Henry Jones, and again, I would be honored to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out, and thank you very much for holding this. This has been a great evening, I believe, and hopefully we've all learned a lot. And I'd like to touch on something that most of us in the conservative leaning area, we relatively agree on the same things. We agree on forest management, we agree on water storage, we agree on these things. We agree on public safety. We want to do the same things. The difference is, how do we get that done? I'm the only candidate who's been in the military. I've spent 17 years of my life there. I'm the only candidate who's been to war. I know what it is like when we have an existential threat, and I know what it is like to experience a level of hostility that terrifies you. I'm honestly more terrified here in California over the level of indoctrination coming in through the schools, the pending pension crisis, amongst all the other budgetary problems. I am scared of that, on what that could look like. I am scared of a government that never wants to stop growing, because governments that never stop growing eventually turn on their own citizens and kill a lot of people. We've had over 100 million people killed from democide, which is government violence on their citizens, over the last 100 years around the world. It's a real thing that can happen. We're not immune to these types of things. We're humans. But I also believe that there's a lot of good in humanity. And I believe that government brings out the worst in us. And I believe love and compassion and charity brings out the best in us. We can take care of each other far better than the government can ever take care of us. So I want to move California back into being a limited government, actual constitutional republic. I want California to get out of our way and let us live our lives. I believe that a lot of people would not only come home, they would really want to stay and invest a lot of time and money into making this just the best state in the union. But right now, California is at odds with what the union represents. And the union is all the states put together. And I believe reaching across the aisle has its purposes when we have mutual goals. When we don't, we have to reach out to the union, to the states, through the courts, through the federal representatives, to try to correct the trespasses that California are doing constantly. They're trying to violate our parental rights, they violate our right to keep and bear arms, they violate our property rights. We have to do these things. We have to fight California, we have to sue California back into compliance with the constitutions. Thank you very much. My name is Joe Turner, I appreciate your support.
Ladies and gentlemen, that ends our forum for this evening. Let's give them a big round of applause. So just some reminders for you. Please vote. That would be the first reminder. The second reminder would be, remember that the top two candidates will move on to the election if no candidate receives more than 50% of the vote. If one candidate gets more than 50% of the vote, that candidate will win. So you will probably see us again, and I hope that you come play with us again, and we'll welcome back at least, well, for sure, 2 of you again. Thank you again for attending. I hope this worked out for you. We'll see you again. Thanks.